Very talented. Okay, here we go.
Hi, Denver Startup Week. I'm Eric Matisik, President and CEO of Highwing and co-founder of Denver Startup Week. Denver Startup Week is the largest free entrepreneurial event in the world, and it's only possible thanks to the support of our awesome sponsors. We have nearly 40 sponsor companies who contribute to make DSW a reality. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our title sponsors, the Downtown Denver Partnership, JP Morgan Chase, Prologis, and Zero, and our track sponsors who help make the great content you're hearing today possible. Battery 621 and Public Works, Capital One Cafe, Colorado Lending Source, Friday Health, Quizlet, Exactly, Zayo, and Zestful. Our headline and event sponsors are bringing you inspiration from around the country. Thank you to Wix, Kinzon, MAPR Agency, Obsidian HR, Kickstart Fund, Promontory Mortgage, Molson Coors, and Comcast. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors listed on the screen. Thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get started.
Public Works is a Denver, Colorado-based design, fabrication, and multimedia marketing firm that allows your company to craft an authentic presence to your target audience. For the past 15 years, the Public Works media team has been telling stories with words, pictures, and films. Our unique approach to brand storytelling allows us to get strong reactions and results from our content. We work in experienced and nimble teams with our crew of producers, directors, and cinematographers that all have firsthand experience and international presence. We are fortunate to have amazing clients that allow us to get wherever we need to go with the right tools for the highest production value. Lots of people can take a pretty picture. Just look at Instagram. While we believe our images speak for themselves, what really sets us apart is our decades of experience, our network, and our ability to make shit happen when it counts. We love bringing unexpected partners together to create added value for everyone. And most of all, we love when we finish a job confident that we've not only executed, but elevated the end product, and we know that everyone involved enjoyed the process. Our company was founded on the idea that life is about learning and teaching through every experience. We apply a strict discipline of work hard, play hard, and make great fucking work. We amplify awesome. We surround ourselves with the best and feed off of infectious innovation, ideas, collaboration, and building long-term friendships and partnerships. Contact us anytime for a meeting at our office, golf course, or on the chairlift.
Can we talk?
I was like, I think I will share my screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Castle. Oh.
I think you're still good.
We are? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Castle. This is
I'm Brian.
Brian. We're the Denver Startup Week Design Track co-chairs for about 9 years for me now and 4 or 5-ish for Brian. We are welcome to the first virtual and global Denver Startup Week. Just a couple things to say. Really want to thank our sponsors. We could not do this without them. It's all free because of our sponsors. And we especially want to thank our design track sponsor, the Public Works, Battery 621. I've had the pleasure of working with them for several years. Just an awesome group of guys, super talented, but also really fun to work with. And they have a live studio here, which they will be filming the 3 o'clock design track session, Trout Tank Food Frenzy pitch competition. They'll be filming that here live in the studio today. So thanks again to Public Works so much. One other thing we like to say at Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, and any combination of those things. It is really important to us that everyone feels heard, represented, welcome, and safe in this space. And if anyone doesn't, let us know. We take it really seriously. Up next on the designer track, 10 a.m. Legal 101 for the creative workforce. So Brian and I really believe in trying to create a toolkit for creatives and designers. I think Brian came up with this, that it doesn't really exist. All these things that exist for traditional entrepreneurs might not be readily available and accessible for creatives. So that's something we've been trying to do for years. And I think that's it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. Hashtag Den Startup Week, hashtag designer track, and check out the designer track clubhouse as well. That's all. Thanks so much, you guys, for participating. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. We have a really awesome panel here.
Thanks, Castle. Thanks, Brian. My name is Frank. I am one of the co-owners of the Public Works and Battery 621. You saw us in that sponsorship video. That was mostly about what Mike Arts, my business partner, kind of runs is the storytelling through digital. What my side of the business does is storytelling through built environment, which is what we're talking about here today. My background is I ran the engineering department for Burton Snowboards for 7 years. Mike was there in the marketing department. And when we left there, we moved right here to Denver, which is where we really wanted to be. And we started this brand storytelling company. So really looking forward to it. Allie?
Yeah, so I'm Allie Johnston. I'm an interior designer. I have spent the last 5+ years plus my college education time kind of focusing on how design impacts community and public spaces. It's been my big focus, anywhere from community centers to homeless shelters to K-12 education. Libraries has been a big focus lately. Really just trying to figure out how do we design spaces from the inside out that really change the way people experience them and for the better. And my particular focus is on anything that marginalized groups or people who just don't always get the nicest spaces, and figure out how we can creatively design those spaces. One disclaimer is I am no longer with Oz Architecture. I think it says that in the bio, but I've parted ways with them. And since then, Frank and I are kind of on a little bit of a mission of trying to figure out what we want to do next with public space design. Holly?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Holly Whalen. I am maybe the odd woman out in this creative trio here. I am a manager for Arapahoe Libraries, and you may be wondering what role I would play here, but that'll come to light later, I hope. I've worked both with Frank and Allie in the libraries, in library land, as we like to call it. And I manage 3 of our libraries. Arapahoe Libraries is a district that serves the southern metro area, but we actually stretch from Sheridan to Deer Trail. And we are not a county system, even though Arapahoe is in our name. We are a system that is a private, a special tax district funded through property tax. And I manage 2 of our largest or busiest public-facing libraries, but I also manage the library in the Arapahoe County Detention Center, which is a whole nother kind of library. But I really feel that libraries are worth looking at when it comes to tomorrow's community spaces, because what we do in libraries now, pre-COVID and now post-COVID, is maybe very different than you may think if you haven't been to a library lately. So I'm looking forward to talking with all of you about that a little bit more. Thanks.
As you guys will all really quickly come to realize, Holly is being way too humble, touting her managerial skills over her creative and leadership skills that Allie and I know very well. So But thank you, Holly. 2020 has been hard, really hard. And it's likely to be hard for a bit. Our community, our country, our world all needs healing and needs to be brought together. And the three of us really believe that public spaces and well-designed public spaces going forward that react to the situation at hand and help us provide rejuvenation for individuals and communities, that bring in marginalized communities into the conversation and amplify their voices, that bring in not just marginalized voices, but all the voices, so that everybody has an equal say in the conversation. We need to feel safe, and our public spaces can help us to do that if we design them well. We need everyone to feel a sense of belonging. So it's not an us versus them, which we have seen from the last few months, even more than it was before, and it was already a bit of that. And we need a smile on our face. We need warmth in our hearts. And that is what we think good design for public spaces can do. Allie, what do you think?
Yeah, so we put together this kind of quick list of thought starters because we can't physically interact with you guys in this time. We wanted to give you kind of some background things to be thinking about as we're discussing. The way we're going to format this is it's kind of the three of us having a conversation. The chat box is open for you to throw in comments, questions. We've got a moderator on the line too, so he's going to monitor that for us. And if there's a really great question, he's going to interject. Otherwise, we are going to save about 15 minutes at the end to kind of go through some Q&A-like session. These thought starters up on the screen are really intended just to get you thinking. So whether you think about it, write it down, share it out in the chat box, it's up to you. But we want to get people to think about what community spaces, what public spaces are. Are they accessible to you or to everyone? Are they pay to play type spaces? And do they connect you to your bigger and better community? Don't feel bad. I love going to the pub as my community space. So that's obviously a paid to play type space. There's no shame in that. I think it's just important that we all think about what those spaces are and then challenge our perception of how we utilize those spaces. So I'm going to leave these up for probably another 5 minutes and then I'll take them down so they're not distracting.
So to get us started into this conversation, we're gonna start with the impact that community spaces have on on all of us, and how we can kind of bring that together. And we're gonna ask Holly, since she knows so well how the library brings the communities that she works in together. We're gonna start with her just giving us an idea of how that happens and what place that library plays in community building.
Great, thanks, Frank. I'm going to guess that many of you have heard the term third place or third space. It's a term that's been around since the late 80s, actually, and it refers to something that is not home, that is not work. Home is the first space, work is the second space, and the third space or place is somewhere in the community where you feel comfortable, where you can feel safe, where you can connect with other people. And for many years, Starbucks was held up as the third place for people. And it's a great example of it. But as Allie has on the slide here, it really is a pay to play space. They don't let you just come in and use their space typically without buying a cup of coffee or several throughout the day. So we wanted to raise the thought of third space and think about what that is for you. Just as a reference, the term was coined by Ray Oldenburg, and his book was The Great Good Place. And I would highly recommend that book because I am a librarian after all. So I have to throw in some reader's advisory, but it talks about the positive contribution that third spaces play in the community and how they bring people together and how they hopefully bring people together that perhaps are not of like mind. So you're not in your little silo talking to people that have the same thoughts and backgrounds and experiences as you do. One thing that occurred to me when we were talking about this and the third place is, and I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but in the time of COVID, we're really more siloed now, and we haven't had access to our third spaces. And that is really, I think, a tragedy that has come out of this year so far. And so what we'd like to talk about is what third space looks like and how we can move forward and maybe create some more of those. The library definitely has become a third space for many, many folks. They use the library to, just like a common workspace, they use the library to meet. They use the library to create content, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. They use the library to just get out of their house and their comfort zone, or they may be somebody who's experiencing homelessness, and their local library is the place that they go to feel safe and comfortable. While we were closed, one of our regular patrons, and we typically are open 7 days a week, 72 hours a week. And one of our patrons who basically lives on the property of one of the libraries that I manage, he didn't have access to anything. He didn't have access to the internet. He didn't have access to human contact. He didn't have access to really fresh water or anything like that. And that is another kind of tragedy of what we've gone through this summer. So I will stop there and I will throw it back to Allie and Frank to talk a little bit more about that.
One of the things that's interesting to me, Holly, Jen just made a comment that one of her favorite spaces is co-working spaces. And I actually am business owner of a shared workspace. Mm-hmm. So that that space is really important to me, and I see how it impacts people. And I think that one of the things that occurs to me there is that with the rise of shared workspace, and now because of this COVID sending us all home, those spaces, those first, second, and third spaces have become a little bit blurred. Our home has become our workspace, and our workspace has become our third space as well as our workspace. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that it just creates this even higher need for people to be able to find these spaces where they can kind of get away from those things that are clouded and have meshed our lives so much in terms of the first and second spaces, and bringing the third space into those spaces because there's no other place to go. It seems sometimes we're at work so long, or we've been at home for so long, and finding those spaces to get that rejuvenation and get that community that's different from our work community. So it's not just so singular.
Right.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about how do we also look at spaces that are currently pay-to-play type spaces, the pub, the coffee shop, name any of them that we consider as community-like spaces or public-ish spaces. And then how do you maybe attach onto that or reprogram a community garden onto it, or an art center, or performing space, or things that I think we all could see the connections and the parallels between. But if we start intentionally designing, building, funding these types of spaces to happen, where you can leave work and you can go to the pub, but you could also go to the community garden on your way home, or you could stop by the local library to catch up on emails before you go home, things like that. I think there's so many ways that we can build those connections throughout our community that kind of help bring together what has become such a, that first and second are now kind of this close. And then that third is now really important. So how do we reprogram those spaces to allow us to have that kind of opportunity?
And it occurs to me that this is probably a research project for somebody to track the impact of not, if for long term we don't have that third space, the impact of that on us psychologically, emotionally, because we can't be working all the time, we can't be home all the time.
Yeah, I also think that even in our typical third spaces, we tend to find people who are very similar to us, think like us, kind of the same age range, oftentimes in the same kind of like wealth kind of categories. And it seems to me that especially libraries and other public third spaces really get us in contact with people who are thinking and who think differently and who are willing to speak up and need to be heard. And we need to be heard. And those people are often willing to listen as well. And we can have some of those hard conversations. Holly, we were talking yesterday and you were talking about all of the programming that's available in the libraries. Can you kind of just give a quick kind of note on that? Because I think that was just such an impactful conversation for me.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So pre-COVID, we had lots and lots of programming at Arapahoe libraries, and most libraries do. But as soon as it became clear that we couldn't have in-person programs anymore, and we were going to need to not have folks in our libraries for quite some time. And actually we just reopened our libraries by appointment last week. But anyway, we've started just massive virtual programming, and that includes author visits. That includes, we have mindfulness sessions twice a week. That includes book clubs online. That includes community conversations. I helped facilitate one a couple of weeks ago on equity and inclusion. And that had come from an author, or a bigger program that we had, and people were so interested in it that we ended up having a smaller program for about 20 people. It was very intimate. To speak with an expert on equity and inclusion, and it was really, really powerful to hear the impact that had on folks. I do. This is not a pitch for Arapahoe libraries, but when I was talking with Frank and Allie about this, I thought, well, for this audience of entrepreneurs, you need to know that we actually have a business librarian on staff. And she is very skilled, and she can help with growing small businesses, conducting market research. I'm looking at our webpage right now. She has helped so many small business owners. And if you're interested in finding some support that way, you can email me. My email is right there on the screen, and we'll show that slide again. And you can also look at arapahoelibraries.org. and under business help. And that might be very helpful for many of you in the audience.
Yeah, I think one of the things Frank and I were, sorry, Frank. One of the things that we were laughing at is Frank and I and Holly were on the phone the last couple of days, just trying to mesh out our thoughts and ideas. And Frank and I kept bringing up like, oh, it'd be really cool if you guys could do this. And Holly's like, we already do that. And we're like, oh, so you guys figured it all out. So we were laughing that the reality is that for so many people who just don't think of the library as one of their third spaces, That's not the first thing you think to Google up, like, hey, is there a jazz club that's happening with the library this week? There probably is. It's pretty much what we've learned is really the library has become this massive resource. And I think one of the reasons we want to bring Holly into this conversation is that while the library is not the only public space, it is not our only community space, it is this really nice kind of nugget of a case study of what public spaces can be and can do for so many people. And we're not designing libraries for low income. We're not designing libraries because they don't have internet access. That's not why libraries exist. They exist as a community hub. And if we take that idea and bring it to a community center, a garden, a open collab food system, all these ideas that you could have and how that works, if you just kind of apply some of the concepts that the public library systems are doing, it's pretty amazing what you can create out of that.
I think we could talk forever about the impact section of this, but what we came together to talk about was the ability to design public spaces going forward. Mm-hmm. Why don't you start us off? You often are in the very, very beginning and figuring out, who the demographic is that is working those mm-hmm. spaces, who the demographic they are serving in those spaces. Talk about how you kind of pull that out so we can get started with the idea of how we go about it.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the challenges of designing public spaces, and they're good challenges. Challenges are always a good thing. And I think one of the biggest challenges with designing public spaces, public elementary schools, public high schools, you name it, it's not designing yet. It is listening and asking the questions. It is finding out who do you need to talk to. It's not usually just the librarians. They know a lot and they'll tell you their information, but sometimes it's sitting in the library in the corner and observing for 2 days and just seeing how people use the space. What actions are they taking? What bad actions? What good actions? I mean, how are people interacting in a space? But a lot of the challenge is finding the dollars from a design fee standpoint, and spending the time and the energy and the effort and a little bit of the frustration to talk to as many people as you can, listen as much as you can without trying to apply solutions yet. Because so much as designers is we like to find a problem and we like to find a solution. And sometimes we can jump a little too quickly and it might still be good, but if we just spend more time listening and talking and digging into the research and kind of applying concepts before we come up with a solution, we usually have a much better outcome. It is a challenge though, because, design is money, unfortunately, not always, but it takes that level of dedication on both the client side, on the design side, to make sure that we're saying, like, to get this right, we really have to keep it as loose as possible for a long time until we think we truly know the problem and we can truly pull some good solutions to that. And then that is still a very open-ended. How you get to the solution is pulling in, developers like Frank who have really creative ideas of how furniture can get involved, listening to the librarians all the way through of, oh wait, but it'd be really cool if we also had this display space, or we also had this checkout space where people can see that we have VR goggles. There's so much, and that's any public space. That's libraries, that's homeless shelters, that's, you can name the gamut, elementary schools. It's really paying attention to what the problem really is.
You touched on a couple of the points within the human-centric design thinking mm-hmm. paradigm. First of all, you talked about empathy, like really getting to know who these people are by listening and then observing. The next stage we talk about in human-centric design thinking is ideation. So defining the problem mm-hmm. is the next step. So you're kind of zeroing in on what are the issues that need to be solved. And then ideation, where you kind of expand back out again from here's the problem. Okay, so what are the many kinds of solutions we can come up with? And then zeroing back in as you come up with designs, and then expanding back out again as you start to prototype and you release these prototypes for play, and then you come up with the final product, and then you start testing, which takes you all the way back, sometimes back to the beginning, where you have to start empathizing again and start observing why why is this not being played with? Or why is the play that they're doing not solving the problem that you thought it was going to solve, or whatever? Sometimes it's coming right back to ideation, or coming right back to design, right back to prototyping, reconfiguring, whatever. But you just keep going around and around in this process. I think one of the most important things that we can do as we design these spaces for the future, we're never going to know. We're never going to be able to figure out what the real problem is or what the real solution is long term. So we have to make these things that are flexible so that people can use them the way they want to use them in their spaces. Holly, you just did a big redesign and redevelopment of the May Library. Can you kind of talk about some of the problems and solutions that you guys saw and solved there?
Sure. The Eloise May Library is at the corner of Parker and Florida. So it's actually got a Denver address, but it is in our catchment area. And it's a very, very diverse community. Some of you may be aware of that. I like to say that the Eloise May Library is it's like a little United Nations. And that is one of the reasons that I love being affiliated with it. You can walk in any day of the week, any moment of the day, and you hear a dozen different languages being spoken. But when it was built, it was an open floor plan. And when it was built, everybody came, and it was just too crowded and it was too chaotic. And, you know, that's a good problem to have for a library. But I've been the manager there for, I've lost track, 8 years or so. And as soon as I started there, like one of the biggest complaints was there's too many kids in here. It's too noisy. What are all these kids doing in here? Because the kids didn't have a specific children's area. So we knocked out a wall and added about 3,000 square feet of space to have a dedicated children's area. That was a couple of years ago, but we hadn't done anything with the library proper, the main part of the floor. And one thing that I was telling Frank and Allie about was that I felt for years that it was too crowded, and the crowdedness was causing bad behavior amongst our patrons. And so we really worked hard to move things away from each other. And ironically, that's really the trend now with COVID, but we don't want people on top of each other and annoying each other and then making them strike out at each other. So we really opened the space up, gave more space for small group work, for people studying individually. We've added things like, I call them phone booths, but they're privacy pods where 1 or 2 people can go in and work. And it's kind of this glass walled thing that works really well. And really the idea was to just give people more room to do what they needed to do. And it's worked out swimmingly. It's really been very, very helpful in what's gone on in the library pre-COVID.
One thing I love about where libraries have gone over the past 20 years is that although they have done a really good job of creating space where you can get to the perimeter of these spaces and have space for working with the kinds of people that you want to be working with at the time, whether that's kids working with kids or you working with entrepreneurs that you're, in collaboration with, and having those collaborative or individual spaces. I also brings together different people so that, especially like in a makerspace, you can have a makerspace where, an older person who's retired that you might have never been able to have a random collision with is, teaching you how to tie a fly for your fishing trip, or, you might have somebody teaching you how to make, jewelry, like a bolo for, out of silver and And I love that thing of bringing together. One of the things we've talked about recently, and we've kind of covered a little bit here, is how we're bringing people together digitally, virtually, and how can we create those same kinds of random collisions where you're interacting with people that you might not have chosen to interact with, but once you're interacting with them, you understand this immense value that they have in your life and in the life of this whole community.
I mean, I even think about how with the huge shift that the libraries have made into digital programming, which is an incredible shift to be able to have the management to say, like, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it quick, and we're going to do it now. But to be able to roll onto that and say, like, all right, now it's a Zoom-based fly tying class. It's a Zoom-based sewing club. It's still bringing those spaces together, and kind of building up when we all get to be back together and the library can be at its full capacity, or community centers can reopen, or homeless shelters can reopen. Having that space and having that programming built in, I think it's huge. But we also talked a lot about just the importance of making sure, as part of an individual in this community, that you go to these spaces, and how much you going there and being a part of it and participating. And even if you're not comfortable with it, even if you're like, I don't know, I guess I'm going to go, and it's uncomfortable, and I've never been to a public library, I haven't been since I was 5 years old, just go, because the reality is the people who are there are really welcoming. And once you're there and you're kind of participating in that, you gain so much from just being around people who aren't your partner, they're not your coworkers, they're not the people you went to college with. They're someone completely different. And it tends to show, I mean, I live next to Union Station, and I use it as my living room all the time because it's so well done. And then every time I'm in there, if you sit down near somebody, or when we were allowed to sit next to people, the amount of conversation you would just have. People are visiting town and they just, oh, are you local? Could you tell me about this building? Could you tell me about this space? Or, the gentleman who just wants to have a conversation because he is probably living by himself, and he'll just start chatting with you. And it's amazing how much you gain from that. I know I always feel very emotionally filled up when I leave those types of spaces, and I've had those random collisions that I might never have a conversation with that guy again. But
we have been told, I think, our entire lives that conflict isn't good, and we should always be kind of looking to avoid conflict or dampen it or whatever. But in the design process, we love creative conflict. We welcome that. And so we welcome this whole idea of, letting everybody have their say in a brainstorming session. There's nothing that you can't say you can't bring up a wrong idea because it might spur somebody else's idea that is brilliant. So everybody's encouraged to say whatever they want. But at the same time, in other spaces besides brainstorming, that creative conflict is actually really encouraged, and we're encouraged to allow that in that space. And in our public spaces, I think, even outside of the design process, that creative conflict is good, and we should encourage it a bit. We should be able to have hard conversations, have tough conversations, and welcome them and be joyful in them, right? Don't leave thinking that guy's such a jerk because he believes this progressive idea or this conservative idea or whatever, but welcome it so you can understand who the other people in your community are. And that's one of those things that I love about that creative, that random collision, is that it brings those kind of creative conflict areas right into our lap.
absolutely. And I think we've also talked a lot about what our public space is going to look like in the future. I mean, that is the title of our presentation, but we've talked about amongst ourselves a lot of the post 9/11 to the post COVID, and what does that mean for our physical public spaces? And Frank, I think I kind of want to kick it over back to you, but we talked a lot about kind of where 2020 is leading us from a fear standpoint, and how we can maybe combat that with public space design.
Yeah, in my intro, I use the words safety and belonging and feeling like we leave with a warmer heart. And another way of looking at that is feeling peace and feeling love for the people around you and feeling loved by the people around you, and feeling joy. And I think those three things, if we can design spaces that allow us to feel stress relief and feel that peace in our life, feel the belonging and the love of our community, and feel just happier by being, in a good relationship with everyone around us. I think that our whole post-pandemic life will be way better than it was going in. And that's my whole thought there. Holly, maybe you could talk a little bit. You mentioned something in our conversations about the comparison with the pre and post 9/11 world, and how we kind of felt like that was going to be a short-term thing. And it turns out that it wasn't. Right. But it also kind of continued some of the negativity that the 9/11 made us feel. And how can we come out of this without the negativity and come out of this with long-term solutions rather than long-term problems?
Wow, I'm not sure
answering that one.
I'm not sure. I haven't had any coffee yet. I'm not sure I can answer that one this morning. I will say that we did talk about, it's September 16th. We just went past another anniversary of 9/11, and we were really reflecting on, we're never going back to the way airports were. Airports were designed a certain way in a certain era, and then 9/11 hit, and that whole thing went out the window. And we just will not be going back from that. So that made us think about, with everything that's going on in our society today, COVID, the BLM movement, our environmental disasters, all of that, how is that going to influence our community spaces? And so I don't think I can answer that question of how we move on from that, but I think the challenge is laid out in front of us, how to help society combat those negative feelings. There's a lot of racism and xenophobia that came out of 9/11. There is coming out of COVID. People are pointing all kinds of fingers at whose fault it is. So I guess my challenge to all of you folks who are entrepreneurs, who are business owners, who are designers, who are humans on the face of this earth, is to work at that and to be aware of that. And I don't want to sound Pollyanna or Hollyana-ish, but I think there is a role for designing community spaces to welcome everybody, to make people feel like they are part of the community, and that we're not in this alone.
Bring out something else that's in our chat room. I think your name might be pronounced Fa. You have two great comments in here. Both are around our homeless population. One is about whether the library has specifically taken on, is the library space a homeless space? And it sounds like maybe even kind of primarily. And then the other one also kind of is mentioning that, but it brings out City Park being one of our great public spaces. And how do we make that space open to everyone? So it is a community building space. We talked a lot about bringing the outdoors in and getting ourselves out from indoors out into our outdoor spaces, because nature is such a healing force. Allie, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. You've had some great thoughts over the last few days about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about building off of what Holly even said about the post-pandemic world, post-2020 world, because 2020 has been much more than just a pandemic. You know, out of 9/11, I think there was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of quick action that was taken on a built environment standpoint. We shut down the airports and we made them very secure very quickly without really thinking about maybe what is that going to do in the long term. And I think coming out of 2020, with everyone being so much more aware of what's going on, Black Lives Matter movement, no one was, maybe people were shocked by it, but there's so much social attention going on right now, and people are so digitally connected, and especially with the pandemic, everyone is living in Zoom land and on the internet, that I think taking a moment to really think about how we design public spaces to get us all back into them, and taking the time to not react, but to really think about what do we want them to be. You know, we've seen what happens when our communities separate. So what happens when our communities can come back together, and how do we build those spaces? And one of the things we talked a lot about is outdoor space, because we live in Colorado, and really anywhere in the country, but we know the importance from a design side of natural ventilation and of natural space and of indoor outdoor connections. We understand from a science level of what that means for people, but we also now know that pandemics are going to happen, and we do need to be able to plan our buildings to be able to spread out, to get a little more room. Why can't the library have a big roll-up garage door out into a garden space that you come in, you grab your book, you grab your table and chair, and you just go outside and use that space? And can that space be a community garden and a cafe? I don't know. It could be whatever it wants to be. But how do we continuously design those spaces, even with our restaurants and what they're going to start dealing with when the winter starts hitting? How are they going to survive? How do we start building in large outdoor dining spaces that can survive in the winter? How do we design spaces that can adapt and change, but really do include our outdoor environment, and kind of get people to understand that they don't always need to be so temperate. They don't always need to be in a 70-degree air-conditioned building or a heated building. We have to start adapting to our environment better, especially as global warming is going to just keep changing our lives every single day. I think there's just a lot we can do, but I think it's taking the post 2020 and post today and post this conversation to really think about what those spaces mean to us and what they could be in the future, and then pushing that to other people and to city planners and to government officials.
Hey, Allie, question from Jen. This is John, the moderator. Allie, Frank, Holly, if either or all of you guys want to speak to just something that was led in by Allie there, was just saying, as someone that offers programming, what is the best way to collaborate with community spaces?
Yeah, I mean, Holly, you could probably speak to this as well. I think so much of it is reaching out. I find that I work with a community garden and I'm part of it. And even just the outreach of, hey, we have this event, or we have this idea, we have this program we want to put on, or this idea that we want to kind of collaborate on. Do you have any interest? I mean, think about the public libraries. They have constant programming. So those spaces are available. And I think Denver's pretty cool in a lot of ways, where we have a lot of event space. It's, again, a lot of it's pay to play, but there's a lot of event space. So I think there's an opportunity for people who say, I have a program and I want to put this on, and it's for the community and it's for whatever. I think people are really open to those ideas. I think, especially coming out of this year, people are really looking for ways to connect. But Holly, can you speak to, maybe, do you guys often get people approaching you saying, we want to have a Latin jazz night, or we want to have...
Yeah, we do. Castle, did you want to jump in? I saw your comment. And did you want to say goodbye?
Oh yeah, thanks guys. I have to run to another session that we're filming live here, but I just want to say thank you so much. This is such an important talk with everything that's going on. And like one of our sessions yesterday, I think it was called like the Great Reset. And I think that's a good way to look at what all this is. And a lot of us get a second chance. And I really like Frank's comments about how do we get out of this with positivity instead of negativity, like 9/11. And Brian and I have been hearing so much, like from the very first session on Monday, about fear. It seems to be like this common thread through all of the sessions. And we think that's really interesting. And designers are the ones who are like, how do we like fight that fear, you know? So we love hearing from designers and artists and creatives, problem solvers.
I say, how do you turn fear into fun? The other F word, right?
There you go.
And it's not just fear, it's also shame, and it's also anger and frustration, and all of this negativity. We got to turn all of that into positive. Just flip it on its head, every one of those.
I mean, you think about how emotionally drained everyone is. Every day I wake up and it's just one more thing that this year has. And I think it's how do we then design and define spaces that are just a retreat, a repress, something that you can just go and just either be with your community or maybe just get a break from it all. It's a lot.
Yeah. So thanks
Castle. Thanks, Brian. We really appreciate you guys being here with us. And
and feel free to keep talking. We just have to run in the other room, but
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Bye guys. Good luck.
Bye.
Thanks.
Allie, going back to talking about the indoors, outdoors, I think that the new business attire needs to be taking nature into account so that we can open up the windows and let the fresh air blow through, even if it's, chilly. And we don't have to be at 70 degrees.
And every woman will tell you that summer is the woman's winter in
hours
the
a day.
office building because
Right.
summer hits and they crank the AC up because all the poor guys have to wear long pants and long shirts and all the women are freezing, and we also wear jackets in the middle of the summer. It's so obscure. I think everyone knows that, my partner will tell you, like, why can't I wear shorts into the office in the summer? It's hot
Right.
and our building is hot. And there's no reason. I mean, I think we are another generation. We're just continuously moving through. There is no reason. Your shorts do not offend me. I think it's those things. It's just we have to think about the norms that have always been there and where we want to get to and what has to change. I think even there was a question on, and you kind of hit on it, but about Civic Center Park and the homeless population there. And how do we make that a more accessible space for everyone to be in? And part of it is we have to think about, why are the homeless folks there?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and right now the shelters are shut down.
Why aren't we there with them?
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you feel comfortable hanging out in that same space? And what could be done? What's the bigger question, the bigger issue, the bigger barrier? What barrier are you seeing that's preventing you from going there? And is it psychological? Is it emotional? Is it perceived? Is it a perceived threat from being there?
And how do we solve it? Like, you don't have to solve it. None of us have to solve it. We all have to solve that by just being there and becoming community with those people. I will tell you that moderator John and I have spent a lot of business meetings on the saddle of a bike. Chris and I are building a bike together right now, and we will spend a lot of time riding that bike. Allie, you and I just went out on your brand new bike. And
you killed me.
That was a business meeting, and it was fantastic. Mike and I, my business partner and I, we talk about, the chairlift as a conference room. We try and, get ourselves out into those places that feel comfortable, that feel invigorating, that feel rejuvenating, that feel like we have ownership, complete ownership there. And so looking for how do we take ownership of all of those spaces, not ownership in a way of taking it away from someone else, but ownership in we all belong here.
Exactly. And it's funny, there's this idea of like, how do you design public spaces? And I think part of it is we could throw ideas and solutions all the time, but I think the biggest thing is, what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to do? Who are we trying to serve? And I think it's if we're trying to have spaces for people to meet, what does that look like? If we're trying to have spaces for people to gather, what does that look like? And how do we bring all that together?
So I just sent a message to Jen and I guess everybody else, but Jen, I would be happy to talk to you more about collaborating with community spaces about your programming. That would be great. I'm not sure I could offer anything for Arapahoe Libraries, but I'd be happy to talk with you more about that. So just shoot me an email and we can chat.
And Taylor stuck a link in there for 99% Invisible is Palaces for the People. That book is sitting right next to me on my desk. That is an amazing book and an amazing podcast talking about that book. So if anyone wants to know more just about the importance of public space and how it affects our communities from a really big to a really small standpoint, it's a phenomenal book. And I'm happy to loan you my copy.
One space that we haven't talked a lot about because we've been kind of focused on that third place in terms of public spaces, but the one space that's in that second space area that we haven't talked about is education. And Allie is a phenomenal resource in terms of public education. So if you got any questions on that and how we can change the way we are educating coming out of this to design that to be a better thing than it was when we came in. I've got 3 kids, 2 college and a high school senior, all, half virtual, or maybe more than half, maybe 80% virtual and 20% in person. And it's hard. And we have got to really, dig in and figure that out better.
Hey, Frank, moderator John here again. Can you speak a little bit to the example of the locked operable windows?
Oh, I can talk to that. So it's funny, so often in the design world, and there's a couple of my old colleagues on the phone, so they know kind of how this goes, is that we design spaces to have operable windows, to have natural ventilation, so that you can cut your HVAC bills down, so that we're building better for the environment. And I laugh how often that I've worked on K through 12 schools where we have these phenomenal windows and they're intended to be open because we know children learn better when they have natural airflow. We know people feel better in their environment when they could feel the fluctuations of the environment and the outdoor and the temperature changes and getting that natural light. But so often we come back in a year or 2 later to check on the space, to ask them how it's going. Are you using the windows? Are you not? Are you finding you're opening and closing them all day? And they're like, oh no, the district bolted them shut. And you're like, oh, well, like from a safety standpoint, they're like, no, it was too hard for them to control the HVAC from like the district office standpoint. So they just bolted them shut. So, and then they're taped over and then there's paper over them. And you're just like, oh, like, so it is hard. And I think it is one of the items that we've laughed about is, we talk about bringing everybody into the conversation. Part of bringing everyone into the conversation is get everyone's buy-in. If you're going to put in operable windows, make sure that the district office is going to let you have the operable windows, because if you put them in and you build this whole space around this idea of how we're going to change the way students are learning in this space, and then the district never bought into that idea and they lock the windows, you didn't bring everybody into that conversation. Where if we had probably worked with the district office more to say like, hey, this is our approach, this is why we believe, this is the research that shows this is the importance of all of this, that window might be open, but unfortunately it's not locked. Now it's probably open with COVID, but so it will hopefully be used, but you have to get the buy-in from everybody.
Yeah, and there are still some questions that are rolling in, but I think in the interest of making sure that we give you guys some time to wrap up, we'll follow up with those individual questions from the panel in one way or another. But in summation, would you 3 like to kind of discuss your final thoughts?
Yeah, one of the biggest takeaways that I would like to put out there is that public spaces are for all of us. And if all of us aren't participating, the public spaces aren't as good. So the most important thing that I can put in there is that we all need to be out there interacting, giving and receiving from what the community has to offer.
Holly, you want to go?
Oh, I thought I was muted and I was typing a message to you to say Palaces for the People is an even better book. So I won't finish typing that. So for me, what I would hope for you is that you seek and create spaces where you learn from those who are different from you. And we can step out of our comfort zones and just learn from each other and try to, again, I'm doing the Hollyanna thing, but try to break down some of the barriers that have been popping up forever, really.
We all need more Hollyanna.
Yeah, we'll take more. I think for me, it's like we've talked, as a panel, we've talked a lot about this, but I live in the middle of downtown. And I think as I watch the city just continuously boom and grow in ways that sometimes are great and sometimes are like, oh gosh, another hotel, another apartment building that has a 10,000 square foot amenity lobby. That's the size of a public library. Like that's huge space that we're not dedicating to our communities. And it's because nobody's asking for it. You've got apartment buildings going up with these massive amenity spaces that say, if you live here, you get a 10,000 square foot co-working space, but if you don't, it's not yours. And they'll probably never get used. And I think I want to see more people pushing to say, like, look, our cities and our communities and our suburbs, in order for us to develop in a good way, we have to have these spaces. So how do we push that? How do you talk to city government officials? How do you talk to developers? I mean, developers make a lot of decisions for us. How do you push those ideas that we want more public space? We want more space that everybody is welcome into. And if you want to build a 30-story apartment building, that's fine, but the ground floor needs to be a public library for downtown. It needs to be a community center. It needs to be a giant maker space. It needs to be something that we can all access, so that our city is developing around this idea that we are all part of it.
Makerspace, makerspace, makerspace.
All about the maker spaces.
Thank you guys all for coming. Thanks for participating in the chat room. I think this is a great start to a conversation. I would love to think this is just a start to the conversation. There's lots of conversation to come. So come get involved in all of these kind of spaces. Find us. You're welcome to email any one of us, but if you're sending an email, we all three would love to participate in that conversation. So feel free to copy all of us in to those.
And Allie's putting that slide up. I think our info's on DSW on the calendar also. I think we're all there.
I'm not sure when this is going to kick off, so maybe take a picture of that screen so you can save our email addresses, because we really would love to hear from you.
All right, guys. We will stay on, I think, for like a minute or two and see what happens. We might get kicked off. We might not.
I thought I saw Zach raised his hand. I don't know if.
Can we? Oh, I have no control anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't have mute power. Oh. No, I guess.
But who can share?